The afternoon moved at its usual slow pace. Automatic doors slid open and closed with soft mechanical sighs. Shopping carts rattled over the tile. A scanner beeped somewhere in the distance. Just another normal day at a neighborhood grocery store. People were busy with their own worlds. A mother comparing prices, a teenager scrolling his phone while pushing a cart, an older man counting change near the register. Nobody looked twice at anything. Near the entrance stood an elderly woman in a clean but faded coat, both hands wrapped around a small shopping basket. She wasn't in anyone's way. She wasn't asking for help. She simply moved carefully step by step, like every motion had to be planned before it happened. Her hair was silver and neatly brushed. Her posture slightly bent, but dignified. The kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving more than most people could imagine. She checked a short list in her hand, then looked up at the shelves like she was calculating the distance. A few shoppers passed her without noticing. One nearly bumped her cart and didn't look back. She just adjusted her balance and kept going, patient, polite, invisible. There was no drama, no warning, just ordinary life unfolding exactly the way it always does. And that's how moments like this begin, not with chaos, but with silence right before someone decides to break it. The calm didn't last. The front doors slid open again, but this time the energy changed before the sound even faded. Loud footsteps, loud voices. The kind of presence that tries to take over a room without earning it. A young man walked in with two friends trailing behind him. Expensive sneakers, confident stride, chin slightly raised like the place belonged to him. He wasn't here to shop. He was here to be seen. His laugh came first sharp, attention-seeking. A few heads turned. That was all the invitation he needed. He scanned the store like he was looking for something to entertain himself with. Then his eyes landed on her. The elderly woman had just reached a shelf, stretching carefully to grab a small box from the second row. Her hand trembled slightly with the effort. He slowed down, not out of respect, out of interest. "Well, would you look at that?" he said, voice loud enough to carry. Didn't know this place had museum exhibits. His friend snorted. Not real laughter, just automatic approval. The woman froze for a second, then lowered her arm, pretending she didn't hear. She placed the item gently into her basket and adjusted her grip. He stepped closer. "Seriously," he continued, circling slightly so she couldn't just walk away. "You shopping or just sightseeing?" A man at the end of the aisle glanced over, then quickly looked back at his phone. A couple nearby went very still, pretending to compare labels. Nobody spoke. The young man noticed the attention building around him. His voice grew bolder. "You need help reading the prices, or you still using money from the last century?" His friends laughed louder this time. The woman looked up at him, not angry, not scared, just tired. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Thank you." That should have been the end. It wasn't. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his head just enough to invade her space. "You sure? Because you look like a strong breeze could knock you over." She tightened her grip on the basket again. Still calm, still quiet, still hoping he'd lose interest. But bullies don't look for noise. They look for silence, and he had just found it. The aisle felt smaller now, not because of space, but because of attention. The young man could feel eyes on him from different directions. That was fuel. His posture straightened, voice getting sharper, louder, more theatrical. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward her basket. "What do you even eat?" "Soup and crackers." His friends laughed on cue. The woman kept her gaze low, focusing on adjusting an item in her basket like it required deep concentration. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was restraint. But to him, it looked like permission. He moved a step to the side, blocking the aisle casually like it was nothing. "You live around here?" he asked. "Or did someone forget to pick you up?" A cashier at the front looked over, unsure whether to step in. A shopper slowed down at the corner of the aisle, then turned the other way. Everyone saw. No one acted. The woman tried to move forward. He shifted again, staying in front of her without touching her. Not aggressive enough to look dangerous. Just enough to make her path feel closed. "I just need to pay for my groceries," she said, voice thin but steady. He tilted his head like he was listening to a child. "Ooh, that's adorable. Got a big night planned." His friends chuckled again, but weaker this time. Even they were starting to feel the weight in the air. She looked past him, searching for space, for exit, for anything that didn't involve this moment. Her hands trembled slightly now, not from fear, from pressure, he noticed. "Whoa, easy," he said, mock concern in his tone. "Don't drop anything. We don't need a medical emergency in aisle 3. That one got a louder reaction from his friends. A couple of nearby shoppers exchanged looks, the kind that say this is wrong without words. The woman finally looked up at him. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't pleading either. They were tired of being someone people thought they could talk over. "Young man," she said quietly, "I haven't done anything to you." That line hung in the air. For half a second he hesitated. Then pride took over. "Nah," he said, smiling again, "you just walked into my day." He reached out, not to help, not to hurt, just to push her basket slightly with 2 fingers like it was an object, not something she held close. The basket tilted. A small container rolled out and tapped against the floor. The sound was soft. But in that silence it echoed, and the entire aisle froze. The container rolled in a slow circle before stopping near the edge of the shelf. No one moved. The young man looked down at it, then back at her, like it was nothing. Like gravity had made the mistake, not him. She bent carefully, one hand holding the basket, the other reaching toward the floor. It took effort, more than it should have. Her balance shifted slightly as she leaned. He watched, not helping, just watching. A few feet away, someone whispered, "This isn't right," but it was quiet. Too quiet to matter. The woman's fingers brushed the container. Before she could grab it, the young man tapped it lightly with the tip of his shoe. It slid away from her reach. Not hard, not violent, but deliberate. A small sound escaped her lips, not a cry, not a complaint. Just the sound someone makes when they realize they're alone in a moment they shouldn't be. He chuckled under his breath. His friends shifted uncomfortably now, but they stayed. Nobody wanted to be the one to challenge him. She straightened slowly, holding the basket close to her chest now, like it was something fragile. "I didn't do anything to you," she said again, voice shaking more from humiliation than fear. He shrugged. "Relax, it's just a joke." A joke. That word landed heavier than anything else he'd said. Around them, people looked away. One man pretended to study a label for far too long. A woman pushed her cart faster, avoiding the aisle completely. Everyone wanted it to end. Nobody wanted to be the one to end it. The young man took half a step closer, lowering his voice slightly but not enough to be private. "You shouldn't be out alone," he said. "Someone could take advantage." The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't respond this time. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was exhaustion. Her shoulders sank just a little, not from weakness, but from the weight of being spoken to like she didn't matter. And that's when it stopped being about words. He reached forward, 2 fingers again, nudging the side of her basket. It tilted. More items shifted inside. She grabbed it fast, heart racing now, breath shallow. Still no shouting. Still no scene. Just quiet humiliation under fluorescent lights. From the front of the store, the doors slid open with a mechanical hush. Cool air rolled in. Footsteps follow. Even. Unhurried. Not loud enough to demand attention, but steady enough to command it. The young man didn't notice. He was still focused on the small victory he thought he'd won. But the cashier at the register went still. The man at the end of the aisle looked up. Someone near the entrance took a step back without knowing why. The atmosphere shifted before anyone saw who had walked in. The woman lowered her eyes again, trying to steady her breathing, trying to shrink a moment that had grown too big. The young man smirked, unaware the room had changed around him. And in that heavy silence, a single thought hung over everyone watching. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind him. Not rushed, not heavy, just grounded. The kind of stance that doesn't ask for space, it takes it without trying. The young man was still half smiling, still riding the leftover energy of his own voice. He didn't turn right away. He thought the moment belonged to him. Then he noticed something strange. No one else was moving. The store noise, the beeps, the chatter, the carts, had faded into the background like someone turned the volume down. He glanced at his friends. They weren't laughing anymore. They were staring past him. He turned slowly. A man stood there, calm, expression unreadable, eyes steady and sharp without effort. Not angry, not loud, just present. The kind of presence that makes people check themselves without being told to. "Pick it up," the man said. Not a command shouted across the room. A statement, simple, certain. The young man blinked. "What?" "The item on the floor," the man replied, voice even. "Pick it up." The confidence drained from the young man's face in small, visible steps. His shoulders lowered slightly. His posture shifted from performance to awareness. "It was just a joke," he muttered, but the energy behind the words was gone. The man didn't move closer, didn't need to. When did disrespect become entertainment? The question didn't sound rhetorical. It sounded like an evaluation. The young man bent down quickly, grabbing the container from the floor and placing it back into the basket with hands that weren't as steady as before. No one clapped. No one spoke. But the balance in the room had flipped. And for the first time since he walked in, he wasn't the biggest presence there anymore. The young man stayed crouched a second longer than necessary, like standing back up meant accepting something he didn't want to face. When he finally rose, he didn't look at the woman. He looked at the man. trying to read him, trying to measure him, trying to find the edge he could push against. There wasn't one. The man stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, breathing slow. No dramatic gestures, no threats. Just control, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. It was just messing around, the young man said, forcing a shrug. Nobody got hurt. The words sounded smaller than he intended. The man's eyes shifted briefly toward the woman, then back. Harm isn't always loud, he said calmly. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's humiliation. The young man swallowed. People nearby were watching openly now. Not pretending, not hiding it. Witnesses change things. They make moments permanent. You had a choice, the man continued. You saw someone who couldn't push back. That's the choice you made. The young man opened his mouth, then closed it again. The excuses he had lined up didn't fit anymore. One of his friends stepped back. Then the other. Distance is honest. It shows who wants to be associated with what. The woman stood still, basket held close, eyes lowered, not in defeat, but in endurance. The man took one small step forward, not aggressive, just enough to bring reality closer. You think this makes you look strong, he asked. No anger. No volume. That made it heavier. The young man shook his head quickly. I said I was joking. Jokies don't require someone else to feel small, the man replied. Silence again. But this silence was different. Before, it protected the bully. Now it exposed him. The young man's breathing changed. Faster, shallower. His eyes flicked around, looking for support, for laughter, for something familiar. Nothing came. The room had moved on without him. Say it, the man said. The young man hesitated. Pride fought with reality. Reality won. I'm sorry, he said, voice tight. Not to me. The words landed with quiet weight. He turned toward the woman, shoulders no longer squared, chin no longer lifted. I'm sorry, he repeated, softer now. I shouldn't have done that. She gave a small nod. Not dramatic, not emotional, just acknowledgement. The man held his gaze on the young man for another moment, long enough to make sure the lesson stayed. Then he stepped back, and the air in the store shifted again, not tense now, just heavy with understanding. The performance was over. What remained was reality. The young man stayed still, finally noticing the weight of his own actions. The man didn't shout, didn't move closer. He let the silence do the work. Strength, the man said, voice low and steady, isn't measured by who you can push around. It's measured by who you choose not to hurt. The young man's friends shifted uneasily. He looked down, ashamed, realizing the spectacle he had created wasn't impressive, it was small. The elderly woman adjusted her grip on the basket, her eyes calm. She didn't speak, but her presence reinforced the lesson. Dignity doesn't need to raise its voice. Power without control, the man continued, is chaos. Fear isn't respect. And this, he gestured subtly to the aisle, the basket, the scattered items. This moment could have gone much worse. The young man nodded, slowly. Understanding not fully, but enough to know he had crossed a line. Is real strength about power or restraint? The question hung in the air, unanswered, yet heavier than anything said before. He swallowed, looking around, realizing people weren't laughing anymore. The weight of observation, of accountability, pressed down on him. The man stepped aside, leaving space between them. It wasn't a victory for the woman. Not really, it was clarity. The young man straightened slightly, as if the weight of the aisle, the stairs, and the quiet authority had rearranged him. And for the first time, he understood that being seen didn't always mean being admired. The lesson wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It landed simply, quietly, and effectively. The man bent down and picked up the fallen container, placing it gently back into the woman's basket. You're okay, he said softly. She gave a small, grateful smile. Thank you. He nodded once, no words about the humiliation. No lectures, just calm, deliberate action. The young man watched, his face pale, shoulders slumped. For the first time he felt small, not because someone shouted at him, but because he had faced the consequences of his own choices. The man turned toward the exit. Each step measured. Each movement quiet but confident. The store felt different. Shoppers resumed their tasks, but the energy had shifted. A sense of awareness lingered. What had been ordinary moments now carried weight. The young man stayed frozen, thinking, processing, unsure how to move forward. Pride, arrogance, and laughter had been replaced with reflection, understanding, and hesitation. And in that quiet moment, everyone watching realized something simple: respect can't be forced. It must be earned. The man held the door open for the woman, who stepped out slowly, basket in hand. He followed behind, leaving the young man staring after them. The moment ended quietly, no applause, no confrontation. Just a shift in perception. Have you ever seen one moment completely change someone's behavior? The question hung in the air, as heavy and real as the lesson itself. leaving the young man to carry it with him long after the store returned to normal.